The way you'll become most valuable to the company you're working in, or the way you'll have the most enjoyable and successful career, is to constantly learn new parts of the business.
Yeah, the greats in any field, any industry, any, whether it's sports or business, whatever it might be, they always know that they don't have it all figured out, and there's more to unlock, and you continue to do that.
When I got into those higher level roles, I wasn't necessarily learning different parts of the airline business, but it took me all those years and all those different jobs to learn how airlines really work. And sometimes I was able to move within the company, and sometimes I had to change companies to make that learning happen. But I felt I was responsible for my career. I wanted to be the guy in my department who knew the least about what was going on the day I started and the most on the day I left. If you believe in it, and your belief in it is based on something real, not just an emotion, then go with it. And don't worry about what other people say. Don't worry if people say it's a bad idea, or don't worry if people make fun of you. Having conviction in your beliefs is one of the most important things you can do to drive your agenda and to really make the kind of change you want to make.
Yeah, conviction starts there. You got to be convinced in your product, service, or abilities, and then that confidence will be grown. That's really, really good insight. Our guest today has been named one of the top 25 most influential leaders twice in the airline industry and is known as a trendsetter. He's recognized widely for his role in transforming Spirit Airlines into the world's first ultra-low-cost carrier. He's been a game changer at multiple airline companies over the last 3.5 decades. Today, he's the CEO of Diemacher and serves on the board of directors with JetBlue and Six Flags Entertainment. Welcome to the show, host of the Airline Confidential podcast, Ben Baldanza.
Mike DiCioccio, so great to be with you. Thank you.
Oh, man, thank you so much. You have such a cool story, and here's the thing. It's all over the place in a good way. You don't stay put too long. Like, whenever you were doing well, you're like, I could do even better, right? There was a lot of reaching up. And so I want to pick your brain today. And the whole idea is that people listening to this episode right now, typically they're high performers, people that are looking to achieve greatness in their life, whatever industry they're in. A lot of times it's young entrepreneurs reaching out to me, hey, thank you so much for this episode, this conversation. So there is a wide range of people tuning in, but you have a wide range of expertise, right? And so what I'm going to do is kind of set you up, and then you're just going to stand underneath the hoop and you just slam dunk all day. You ready to do that?
I'm ready, Mike. Thanks.
I want people to know that they can tune into your show. Go to airlinesconfidential.com. And then also Diemacher is really cool. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And that's actually spelled DiemacherLLC.com. Everything's clickable in the show notes, including Ben's his social media. You guys can connect with him on LinkedIn directly. I know he's active on there, and he's happy to do that. So taking a deep breath right now. Ben, are you ready for liftoff?
I'm ready, Mike.
Oh, there's a lot of puns in here, by the way, guys. Some of them are intentional. Some are probably not intentional. But just sit back, enjoy, right? If you need anything, flag down your stewardess, okay? So oddly enough, what has been an incredible career in the airline industry, it started back in Amtrak in 1983. We're going to date you a little bit here, Ben. 1983, before I was born, by the way. You then finished up an internship with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. And then you landed a job with American Airlines, and you really never looked back since. So take us back to 1983. Did you have a vision at that point or understanding of what possibilities were ahead for you?
I had no idea, Mike. I was a junior in college at that point, and I went to school at Syracuse University. And in the spring of my junior year at Syracuse, I spent that semester in Washington, D.C. on sort of a semester in Washington program. I was still enrolled at Syracuse, but actually lived at American University and took classes there. And as part of that program, I got that internship at Amtrak. And up to that point, I didn't know what I really wanted to do in life, but I knew what I liked to do, and I knew I liked complex things and solving puzzles. And what Amtrak taught me was how fun transportation could be. They were a big company. I liked the network aspect of how do you decide which trains go where. I liked the big capital investment things of these trains are expensive. I liked the people aspect. It takes a lot of people to run a company like that. You have labor unions, a lot of government issues, public policy issues. And I just thought that's fantastic. And maybe transportation's a way to do something like that. So when I went back to Syracuse for my senior year, I started focusing a little more on transportation as a way, as a business. And then when I went to graduate school, that's when I got the internship with the Port Authority. And that's when I started to think, well, maybe planes are a little more fun than trains. And in the summer between my 2 years of graduate school, I got an internship at American Airlines. And then I went back to work there full time when I graduated in 1986.
That's awesome. So did you have that mentality though of like of growing within the organization too, or were you just kind of like following your heart a little bit? I know you're in your early 20s at that point, and a lot of people listening may be in their early 20s and just kind of getting out of college and having that first internship. And 99.99% of the people don't have it figured out right then and there. And even those who think they do, life takes different turns. So what was your mentality there as a youngster?
Well, if you want to go back even further before Amtrak, from 12 years old until I graduated from high school, I used to deliver newspapers in my hometown. So that's where I first learned the idea of sort of customer service and delivery and on time and network and things. And Amtrak just sort of made more sense. And then planes to me made a lot of sense. I'll tell you what I liked about American Airlines going out of college. The US airline industry was deregulated by the federal government in 1978. That means that after 1978, airlines could decide where they flew and what they charged. Before that, the government controlled that. And
Wow.
American Airlines in the mid 1980s was a real innovative company that was taking advantage of this deregulation. Things that are really common today and seem like hasn't this always existed, like frequent flyer programs or like connecting at a hub
It was
or a
it was all
concept.
cutting edge
It
technology.
was all cutting edge at that point, and in most of it was being developed at American. So I saw going to American Airlines as to go at the time to go to the leading company in the industry to really learn how the industry in this new deregulated environment would work. I got hired into the finance department, and the CEO of the company at the time, Bob Crandall, was a big finance guy. So he pushed all the big decisions of the company through the finance department. So in that role, I got to be involved in fleet decisions and route decisions and labor contract decisions and things like that. And so it was a fantastic place to go to work out of college.
I want people who are tuning in at any age level, at any experience level, to realize, do you see what he's doing here? He's stacking knowledge. He's stacking experience. He's a sponge to those around him, the peers that he was looking up to at the time, the peers that he was saying, man, I don't like the way this guy or gal's operating. You're just taking it all in, right? And little did 25, 28-year-old Ben know that where he'd be, for the next 30 years. It's really incredible, 33 plus years at this point, right? So here's the next little turn we're going to take. So you've earned quite the reputation, and I know because I did some research on you, and it's really the more I was digging, the more excited I was getting to do this interview. You earned quite the reputation over the years to find a way to improve innovations in scheduling, pricing, and revenue management. Those are kind of the three areas, right? We're talking impressive numbers, guys. Like unit revenue growth going from 78% to 115% in 2 years with Continental. So, what attributes would you say have led to your uncanny ability to innovate and execute results at such a high level?
Well, Mike, I think the answer to that question is to take prudent risks and just test, test, test. The reality is you can come up with ideas and you can say, what if we try it this way or not? But you don't really know how consumers are going to behave. You don't know how competitors are going to behave. You don't know what the reaction is going to be until you put it out in the marketplace. Even Steve Jobs didn't know how successful the first iPod was going to be. He knew it was a great product, but he didn't know quite how good it would be, right?
Yeah.
And so until you put things in the marketplace, you don't know. So the real answer to that is to come up with a lot of ideas. I used to work for a CEO at Continental named Gordon Bethune, who used to say, you know how you come up with good ideas? You come up with a lot of ideas, right? And so the idea was when you test a lot of ideas and try a lot of things, you'll find some work and some don't. But if you're measuring what you do and you're staying intellectually honest and not guessing why things are happening, but looking at data, then what you can start doing is doing more of what works and less of what doesn't work. In an airline context, fly more routes that work, fewer routes that don't work.
Yeah.
Right? More prices that people buy, fewer prices that people don't buy.
It's so crazy to think that how well everything is mapped out, whether it's GPS on the road, GPS in the air, and like how it took years and years to figure out the best way to get from Buffalo to Texas, and all the different airports or whatever, right? My daughter just flew into San Antonio and it was like 3 hours. I was like, wow, that's a lot quicker than I thought. But they figure, you get better, you improve over time, right? The routes get better as you were just talking about. Another interesting part to your whole career and how it unfolded or unpacked, right? Um, and here's another fun pun. We're talking about unpacking. We're going to talk about you got recruited into UPS, right? So while you were there, before eventually making your way back to the airline industry, which you kind of, anytime you were out, you kind of got pulled back in, it seemed, or that might have been intentional on your part, but you helped create a pricing protocol change which is really cool, guys. It's still in use today. 25 years later at UPS, they're still using the kind of the protocol that you changed. Can you share more about what you created there and its impact?
Absolutely. Well, UPS at that time, and this was in the early 1990s, UPS has always been a great company, but they were a very industrial engineering based company. So, what they would do is the marketing department would do a forecast of how many packages would they likely have to carry in the next year in and among every zip code in the United States, from Buffalo to Washington and everywhere else. Okay. and, and then the engineers would say, what's the lowest cost way to make service on all those? So, how many package cars do we need? How many airplanes do we need? How many people do we need to operate all this stuff and things like that? And for many, many years, they sold off a rate chart, which is if you're going from zone 1 to zone 4 and the package weighs 50 pounds, here's what you pay, right? And that using that system, the company made a lot of money. So they knew that every package they sold was paying for itself on the network. What happened in the early 90s, and one of the reasons they hired me and a few other people from the airline business, was they were thrust into discounting. A few other competitors came into the market and started really discounting shipments. So UPS was in the position where they were buying airplanes and buying more trucks, but didn't even know if the packages they were carrying were going to pay for that. So all of a sudden, that rate chart, which was being discounted now, couldn't be trusted to deliver profits for the.
It was a gamble at that
It
point.
was a gamble. So what I came up with is they should stop pricing their product based on the cost to serve it, to deliver it, but they should start pricing their product based on the value customers see in the product. Let me give an example. You're running a manufacturing shop and you're getting nuts and bolts delivered to your shop. What you're willing to pay for your deliveries is very different than a law firm who is sending papers to their client and just billing back the charge to the client, right? Very different. So we called that idea target pricing, meaning charge the price that reflects the value the customer's getting in the product. That completely changed the way they price and meant depending on who was buying, maybe they would get a different price at different times. And what that did is it allowed them to be very competitive in an environment with discounting by competitors and stronger competition in both the air and ground side.
Is that similar to, you want next day air, it's going to be $14. Standard shipping might be free or $2.99, or whatever it might be. I don't even know shipping prices anymore. I buy so many things on Amazon, I don't even look. And it's because I usually look for that little Prime logo. So you created that whole idea based on just looking at a situation, analyzing it. Hey, this is wrong. We're hurting. We're bleeding over here. And we're kind of gambling with company money. And why don't we just change the way we're thinking about it, right? There's a paradigm shift. And how old were you when you here you are at UPS and they're like, who's this guy, right? And then you make this change, and now 25 years later, they're doing it.
I was about 29, 30 years old at that
That's
point.
cool, man. That's awesome. That's younger than I am. Hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick 60-second timeout. We're going to hit a sponsorship here, Social Chameleon, which is my podcast production company. So we're going to hear that in a second, and we will be right back. Podcasting is a great way to engage with your audience and stay consistently relevant. The only problem is you don't have the time or desire to produce your own show. You simply want it done for you, and that's where Social Chameleon comes in. All you need to do is press record and upload the files. We'll handle the rest. From planning, production, post-production, distribution, and digital marketing, we have you covered. We realize that times are tough and funds are tight, and Social Chameleon believes in building supportive business relationships. By clicking on the link in this promo, we'll provide you 7 free podcasting tips to get started, as well as a free 30-minute online consultation. This is the perfect opportunity for entrepreneurs, keynote speakers, industry experts, influencers, and anybody who has a personal brand. With Social Chameleon, we help you build a brand that is out of this world. We're ready and waiting, so what are you waiting for? Click on the link to get started today. All right, we're back in action with Ben Baldanza, and you guys can connect with him directly on social media. Again, everything's clickable in the show notes, and especially his LinkedIn. You can go ahead and connect with him that way. I know he's active there. Ben, thank you again for being here today. And guys, you could tune right into airlinesconfidential.com, his podcast. He has a nice website set up for the podcast, and then DiMacherLLC.com. We're going to talk about what that is in just a moment. Ben, thank you again for being with us.
Thanks, Mike. I'm enjoying the conversation.
Can you share your favorite moment as CEO of Spirit? This is where you really if you had a Pro Bowl type career, it happened mostly with Spirit. So talk about your favorite moment as CEO of Spirit Airlines. And then was there a moment that always kind of comes back to you, like whether it's a moment of success or a huge win in innovations?
Yeah, absolutely. There were a lot of innovations that took place at Spirit, and we were a small company that realized we had to compete on a different basis if we were going to be successful. We knew we would never have the number of airplanes or the amount of money that, say, an American or Delta would have, at least at that point. And so we really started unbundling the product, meaning saying we're going to charge you less money to board the plane, but if you want to carry bags, we're going to charge you separately for that. If you want to pick where you sit on the plane, we're going to charge you for that, and things like that. And
you guys were creating that, or that's what the industry was doing?
No, that's what we started putting in place,
okay.
And the industry largely matched us.
Were you guys kind of looked at as like the redheaded stepchild a little bit?
We were like a complete pariah in the industry. That's right. Everybody said, why
when
would
you walked
be
in the room,
that?
the other airlines go, oh man, because you were kind of challenging the status quo.
Well, that's right. And in fact, we put more seats on our planes than all of our competitors because that could lower the price, just like when you carpool, everybody shares the gas, right? So we went to this one conference where all different airlines were represented, and each table held 8 seats, but we asked them to put 12 seats at our table. And so we were all so people would visibly see sort of the way our business model works.
That's incredible. You guys are sitting on each other's laps. That might be a little extreme.
Yeah, no, that's right.
We got 14 people here at our table. No, that's great.
So the story I was going to tell though is in 2010, we were looking at a problem we had. We had a lot of seats on our planes, but we couldn't put more overhead bins than anyone else because
Hmm.
that's fixed space on the airplane. So what we were finding is we were gate checking a lot of bags. We charge for we charge for bags. And so we're finding that at departure, not all the bags that wanted to be brought on board could fit. So we were deciding what to do with this, and we decided to put in a charge for large carry-on bags. And we actually decided to make it cheaper than checking a bag. So there would be so I'm sorry, we
Is that where
decided to
you would
make it
check it
more
like on the
expensive
kind
than
of?
checking a bag so that you
I
would
got
have
you.
an incentive to actually check the bag.
Hmm.
And when we announced this, it got 100% negative media coverage. Everybody thought it was the worst idea ever. Matt Lauer on the Today Show said that the announcement went over like a fart in church. That was his
Yeah,
statement,
yeah.
right? And it was terrible. And so we decided after a week, well, what do? We think this is the right thing to do. Everybody's negative. We decided to go on the offensive. So we did a viral ad that's still on YouTube where I got in an overhead bin. When you first look at the ad, you don't realize I'm in an overhead bin. But I talked about how people were bringing a lot of things on board and it was getting kind of crazy. What we were doing at Spirit is lowering the ticket price and charging for a carry-on bag. Then the camera pans out and you realize when I'm in a bin and it says, without this change, you have no idea what people would put in an overhead bin. And then somebody shuts the door. And that was so much fun to do. And what that did is it turned the tide. And it's not that everybody loved the idea of paying for the carry on bag, but people started to understand why we did it. And then flight attendants started saying, this is really great because I'm not having to lift as many big bags and we can board and deplane a lot faster. So people started seeing the benefits of it as well. And I'm never going to tell you that it became so popular that everybody wanted to do it, even though a few more airlines do that today. But it went from all negative to people starting to argue on the facts, not on the emotion of it.
Such a huge lesson. One of my favorite moments on Mic'd Up so far that you say this, because a lot of times entrepreneurs are going to put something out, whether it's with their company or within their industry, and it's not going to get great feedback right away. And it's not because it's not a great product or service or idea. It's many times the understanding of why. And Simon Sinek is awesome in talking about understanding your why personally and a company's why. And I remember when I first saw that video, he was talking about Apple, which is a company we all know to be innovative and highly successful with making changes. And what he talks about there is people who use their products, right? They understand kind of the why behind Apple. They like feel like they're kind of part of that environment. And so Matt Lauer with the fart in church comment and all these guys that were or gals that were giving you negative press didn't understand the why. And I'm going to say it's most of that was on you guys to not address it until you did like the fun advertisement, right? But I'm not trying to pick on you. This happens all the time in business, and so it's so important. Rather than saying we're doing this or we're charging for the carry on, it has to almost be like, hey, because we realize like we're doing the lower ticket prices, we're figuring out a way that we can um, make it beneficial for you to check your bag, right? So if you actually check it, it's lower cost than if you bring it on board and pay the higher price for this huge carry-on item. It helps us and it helps you, right? It's just like in sales, the way you position it. So you're telling them we're going to charge you for something that you didn't pay for before, but you're kind of explaining why first, and then you're like, "You cool with that?" And most people are going to be like, "Yeah, I get it now. It makes sense." Like if you charge me for a second cup of coffee at a restaurant, and you never did for 12 years, and I'm a regular there, but then this year you're charging me for the refill, I'd be a little bit pissed off. But if the waitress came over and said, hey, we have a new policy, we were able to open the restaurant earlier than anticipated with COVID. One of the changes we're doing is we have to charge for like if you wanted a second or third cup. Mike, I know you're here all the time. You're a great customer. I hate to even say those words, but that's what we're doing to be able to stay in business. Now I'm like rooting for you. I'm happy you're in business, and I'll pay the $2.49 for the second cup of coffee. But if all of a sudden Nancy, the waitress, she's not making eye contact that day, and she just slaps the bill, and she's like, "Yeah, that's gonna be an extra coffee." Now I don't feel good, about the whole situation. So I know that was a little bit of a rant, but I just wanted to make sure we covered that because it's really important. You guys made this big decision and it wasn't well received, but then eventually the other people in the industry, what did they start doing? It's a copycat industry. So you were the trendsetter on it once again, right?
That's exactly right. And what you find is that when people understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, it can just work a lot better. And that doesn't mean everybody's going to love the product. Not everybody's going to like having to pay for the second cup of coffee or pay for the carry-on bag. But if they understand why it's happening, they put it in a different space than I'm just getting screwed by this.
Yeah, totally, totally agree. Now, something that's kind of similar vein, but a different topic is safety. And a lot of times safety in the, whether it's in any industry, but especially transportation business, um, it's usually associated with luxury and premium brands. It's like you see it like, the premium brands always talk about their safety ratings, right? The 5-star and what it is. And it kind of just comes with it when you're paying for like luxury, you're just that assumption that it's safe and you're protected kind of all comes with it, right? But you guys were more of a discounted airline, right? You were a budget pricing model. Did you have a struggle where people kind of didn't, not that it was justified, but that they had like safety concerns because it was on a budget, or did that not really, was that ever a concern?
Well, we worried that people might think that. And, a few years earlier, a budget carrier named ValueJet had a crash in the Everglades. And at that point, that airline became AirTran. And a lot of people sort of thought, I mean, that was so damaging to that brand that they bought another airline called AirTran and changed the whole name of the company. But so, and there was a sense at that time that, well, can you charge such low prices and actually maintain your equipment well and
Yeah.
pay mechanics to do the job
Literally
well?
people's livelihood, your
Yes,
employees
that's right.
and your customers. It's a number one priority. We're putting you in the air and we're going to get you to where you're going.
That's right. So we worried about that in the sense that we knew that that's a concern about low price carriers everywhere. So here's what we did about that. First of all, we had the youngest fleet of airplanes in the US at that time. So we really started promoting that. We called it our fit fleet. And we had a picture of a little airplane with like muscles on it, right? Because it was fit. But the idea was if you flew another airline, likely the plane you're going to be on is older than ours because we have a brand new fleet. And that's really good. Not only is it safe, but it's fuel efficient too. So it's even better for the environment. The next thing we did is we made sure that we did our own maintenance in house for the what the airlines call line maintenance, meaning the work that's done on the plane while it's in a schedule. And we made sure to hire mechanics, train them well. And the Federal Aviation Administration, which manages safety in the airline industry, the way they put pressure on and audited Spirit was the same as they did for an American or Delta or anything. So we knew that we were held to the same standard as the big guys. We knew that we had a newer fleet, which made us a little bit more modern, and we knew we hired really good mechanics who did a great job with the fleet. And so we pushed that regularly. We watched the stats regularly. We instituted what we called a safety culture in the airlines, meaning that we wanted everybody to raise their hand if they saw something happening, when they if it wasn't safe. When I would fly on Spirit, I would always talk to the pilots, and the first two questions I would always ask them, Mike, is I would say, "How are you feeling today?"
Hmm.
Meaning, you feel
Sure.
ready to fly this flight, right?
Yeah.
And then the second question I'd say, ask them is, do you know how to file a safety report? And if they said yes or no, I'll say, have you ever filed a safety report? Because we wanted our pilots, our mechanics, our gate agents, our flight attendants to file safety reports, meaning I see this happening and we don't think it's safe, because that allows us to stay on
Work
top
on
of
it.
it.
Yeah.
So we had a great safety culture. We had a fit fleet. We had strong mechanics, and we knew that we had the same oversight as the big guys. So we never advertised all that. The industry is, as an industry, the airlines are uncomfortable sort of competing on safety. The reality is, if Delta crashes a plane, it hurts the whole industry, not just Delta, because it reminds people that planes can crash and it's not a riskless endeavor,
But
right?
when the company named Value, what was
Yeah,
it?
value jet. Yeah.
Value Jet crashes. Oh no, all of their planes must go down, right?
No,
But
that's right. Or
but it was just
all
one.
low
It was
cost
one out
airlines
of,
are going to
yeah.
go down or
It
something.
could have been the only
So,
time in history it ever happened out of, I don't know how many flights they put in the air. But the point is, all it took was once. It was Value associated. So then the assumption was that it's because that they're cheap.
well, and the reason, Mike, that air crashes are such big news is because they hardly ever happen. And
It's
yet,
like a
with thousands and
shark
thousands
attack.
of flights happening every day, we have such a very safe air system.
Hmm.
And low cost airlines and higher price airlines all do the same thing when it comes to safety.
Make me feel better about flying, because I enjoy flying, and it's something that I like traveling for work. I like to meet new people. These Zoom calls and everything are great, and Riverside, how we're recording today, is great. But I do love getting together with people, and if you can meet them, in like a mutual location, and they can show you their town or whatever it might be, it's fun. You get to go out, learn new things, see new places. I enjoy traveling. But I also do, every time we're about to take off, that goes through my head, as I'm sure it does the other passengers as well. Now I have a daughter traveling that I mentioned earlier, and so her safety is obviously my primary concern. So talk to us about actual general safety, whether it was with Spirit or any airline. What are those numbers or ballpark? I mean, what are you more likely to do? Get struck by lightning than have a plane incident?
You're much more likely to get struck by lightning than get into a plane incident. Most things that happen with airplanes that are safety related are small issues, meaning a piece of ground equipment might roll into an airplane and put a dent in the body, and that's got to be repaired before the plane can fly, but no one gets hurt. The number of issues where people actually get hurt or even killed are very few and far between. And when they happen, they're news around the world. And the world works together, the world, not just the United States, to figure out why that plane crashed. And improvements in manufacturing, improvements in regulation have happened every time something like that has happened. So every time there's been a crash in the world in the last 40 years, there's been a massive investigation that's been led by a group called the National Transportation Safety Board in the FAA, but also with other equivalent bodies around the world to really understand why that happened. And the world gets smarter every time something like that happens. So the reason planes crashed in 1980s, no planes crashed for that reason in 1990s. The couple of planes that crashed in the 90s, no planes crashed for that reason in the 2000s, and so on. So we're getting better and better, and that means that the time between something going wrong is getting longer and longer. What we haven't figured out how to stop yet, though, is the lone wolf kind of problem. I mean, that Malaysia airplane that disappeared, the two pilots in that plane, or at least one of the two, wanted that plane to disappear. And that's a little harder thing to
Well, that's until when there's intent.
adjust.
I mean,
That's
we're
right.
recording this and we're only a couple weeks away from the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And how do we
Yeah.
not bring that up when we're talking about airplanes and safety? But yeah, obviously, if there's ill intent, that makes things a little bit more difficult. But we're talking about the natural wear and tear of an aircraft. It's a very safe thing. And we were talking about how it gets attention when something goes wrong. It's very similar. And I said shark attacks, but I wanted to make sure you finished your thought and didn't start riffing on that. But it's so true. Like, we hear about shark bites and shark attacks and people being killed, and it's like happens 17 times a year. And with the like thousands and probably, I don't know, millions of people, if you think about in all the bodies of water in the entire world, right, in a year, how many people are within close contact or close quarters with sharks? It's a lot, right? And if the number's like 17, that's like it's so incidental, accidental. Like you probably accidentally kicked it, you know. Great whites aren't sitting there going, "What am I having for lunch today? Oh, this leg over here looks good." They're not put. That's not even on the menu, right? And what I found out too is I used to go to Myrtle Beach. Like I went like 3 years in a row in my high school years in the summer with my girlfriend and her family, and I always loved watching Shark Week, you know, and you learn a lot of cool stuff. And I love Jaws and all those great Spielberg movies. So, but I remember learning something that was interesting. We'll move right back. We'll get right back to airlines in a second here. But what happens is when the waves break, there's a lot of oxygen right at that area where all that action is happening underwater. So oxygen, we need it to breathe. Sharks need it, right? So because of that oxygen in the water, they chill out right there because they get to do less work and get more oxygen. And where do the waves break? Right where everybody's hanging out. So they're not hanging out there because you're hanging out there, Ben. They're hanging out there because the oxygen in the water is greater. So people think from overhead views, look at all the sharks. They think that they're kind of snooping around. They're not. We're in their area hanging out. So just kind of an interesting thing I wanted to share that the little bit of knowledge I have about sharks. I thought it was pretty cool. Something I learned from Shark Week, other than anticipating the next uh, deadly scene, right? Because they're so far and few between. But then they make a movie about it, and then everybody's afraid to get in the water again.
That's right.
You know, here's something that might be the most important question of the interview. No pressure, but you've climbed the ladder many times. You know, so talk to our aspiring business leaders. Some may be entrepreneurs, some may be working towards district, regional, C-level opportunities. If you can give them a few takeaways focused on the topic of staying at a current company or moving on to a new opportunity. I mean, you have a stretch, it seems like 2 to 3 years in your story, you're kind of moving on to the next opportunity. But you also do have a 12-year window when you were at Spirit as the CEO and president. So talk about kind of the dichotomy of you know, staying somewhere, but also being mindful of the next opportunity.
Well, Mike, you know that joke or parable, I guess, of all the blind people feeling the elephant, and one thinks it's a tree because he's feeling the leg, and one says it's something else because he's feeling the trunk, and one thinks it's something else because he's feeling the body. And they only by sort of feeling all parts of the elephant do they realize it's an elephant. That's a good way to think about a career, I think. Businesses are complex things. Even simple businesses have complex costs and revenue structures and customer service issues and things. I mean, tell someone running a deli that their business isn't complex when they've got a long line and customer complaining the bagel's not cooked enough, right? And things like that, right? And then you have real complex businesses like, you know, an airline or a manufacturing company or something. And so as an employee of one of these companies, you're going to be most valuable to that company the more you know. And the job you have at any one point will teach you part of that business. And so you want to do that as well as you can, work as hard as you can, learn as much as you can. But when you understand that piece of the business, you can stay in that job forever, maybe, and then go get your excitement in other parts of your life. But if you want to grow your business career, that's the point when you say, I need to start learning again. So I'm going to move from this part of the elephant to another. I mean, I'm going to move from this department to maybe another department in the company and learn a whole part of the business I don't know anything about,
Right.
right? And get good at that. And the more you do that, and sometimes that might require moving a company. You might say, look, I really want to move. I really want to learn about the sales function, but there's not an opportunity for me to move in the sales function in my company. So I'll go to one of our competitors who wants me to work in sales,
Sure.
right? That could be the case. And so if you look at my career early on, I worked 3 to 5 years at American, then Northwest, then UPS, then Continental. Um, but when I went to US Airways and I had a bigger role there, I was there for 6.5 years. And then at Spirit, I was there, like you said, for 12 years because when I got into those higher level roles, I wasn't necessarily learning different parts of the airline business, but it took me all those years and all those different jobs to learn how airlines really work
Yeah.
because I had to have a lot of different jobs. And sometimes I was able to move within the company, and sometimes I had to change companies to make that learning happen. But I felt I was responsible for my career. I was in charge of my career. And my wife and I used to talk about it. I always wanted to be on a real steep learning curve. I wanted to be the guy in my department who knew the least about what was going on the day I started and the most on the day I left.
Yeah, the greats in any field, any industry, any, whether it's sports or business, whatever it might be, they always know that they don't have it all figured out, and there's more to unlock. And you continue to do that, right? And but you're also well versed. You would learn some stuff with shipping at UPS and distribution, and then you learn how to be a leader of people. And at the end of the day, every organization's a leader of people, whether it's face to face or now a lot of things are digital, right? And some people are selling apps and widgets where it's not no face-to-face interaction, but you're still selling to people and people are using your product. So you better understand people, right? So that's such a huge part of it. And I just love how you talked about that elephant analogy. At first, I'm like, where's he going with this? But it makes so much sense. And the other thing I got from that's not the point you were making, but it kind of similar tone, is that everybody experiences things differently. Like when they tell a story about experiencing, whether it's the elephant, right? They all have a different perspective on it. Like some people felt the tusk first, so they would explain an elephant differently. Some people it was the big ear, or something was a smelly rear end. Whatever it was, everybody had a different perspective because they met the elephant from a different spot. That's a different story, but kind of an interesting thing, right?
Exactly right. And the way you'll become most valuable to the company you're working in, or the way you'll have the most enjoyable and successful career, is to constantly learn new parts of the business.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to just, we got it all figured out. We're good. We're just going to coast, nothing going on over here. Yeah, that's not gonna work out too well. All right, so we finally made it to the place when people are tuning in, and they've been with us since the beginning. They go, "What is Diemacher? Tell us more."
Okay. Well, when I left Spirit after my time there, I realized that my real value to companies would be helping companies that are smaller, maybe than their biggest competitors, or maybe struggling with figuring out who their customers really are, or how they can best serve those customers, or trying to figure out how they can make more money or be more competitive even though maybe they're not the biggest or the best financed in their space. So I set up Diemacher as an advisory company to help companies that are in that space. So what I do with Diemacher is I help companies usually that are a little younger, some startups, some that have been in business for a while, who are trying to make their business better, trying to figure out how to generate more revenue, how to lower costs, how to position themselves better in their competitive space. And through Diemacher, I've been able to work with a lot of different kinds of companies. Again, on my steep learning curve idea, I don't have to use Diemacher for a lot of airline work, right? But for other companies that can benefit from the lessons I've learned
Sure.
working in airlines, being a CEO and such. And so that's what Diemacher is all
Yeah.
about. And I'm really happy with the way it's working. I've got a lot of great clients. And by serving on the boards of some great companies like JetBlue and Six Flags, that keeps me involved in sort of the big business world too.
You know what love most about this interview so far is whenever you're talking about either something from 1983 or something that's relevant that you're in and working in today, you have that smile. And if you guys are listening, you're missing out on it. Ben is like ear to ear with a smile, and every time he's talking about what he's doing, you could see it, you could feel it. There's an energy behind it. So, guys, go and watch this on YouTube because you get to see Ben, who's lighting up like a Christmas tree when he talks about what he does because he loves it. He's passionate about it, and there is truth to that. When people say, like, when you do what you love, you don't work a day in your life. Well, you're still working, you're working hard. Ben works a ton, but he's enjoying his work. So he has that, he feels good about it, right? Just like a ball player feels good going to the ballpark, and that's what they get to do for a career. That's amazing. He's got that same vibrato about him when he's going to the ballpark, which is his office, right? So just a really, really cool thing I noticed in talking to you today, because sometimes after a 30-year career, it's easy to get jaded. And I don't feel that you're jaded today. Like you're still enjoying it today as much as you did in the beginning.
That's absolutely right. And I don't want to be doing today what I did 20 years ago, right? I want to be
Yeah.
doing new things and learning new things. And the world is changing. The world's getting smarter in some ways. The world's getting more difficult in other ways. So staying competitive, staying relevant is an ongoing issue, and it's an ongoing challenge for businesses of all sizes.
Awesome, man. You're incredible. Like it's been awesome getting to know you a little bit more, and I know there's so much more to your story we can learn, but, let's like, kind of if we could bring it down, um, everything we talked about, could you give us an idea, like, who would you say has been the biggest positive influence in your life? Is there someone that stands out, whether it's a family member or mentor, public figure? Like, who's helped you get to this level?
I know it's going to sound a little, maybe
Cliche?
trite to some
Uh,
people, but the answer is really my mom. My mom died very young. She died when she was 58 of what some people call Lou Gehrig's disease,
oh, man.
ALS.
Sorry, man.
But my mom never went to college, and I was the youngest of five kids. But my mom was always this intellectually curious thinker, and we would talk at the dinner table about things going on in the world because my mom would start the conversations, and she would read books all the time, and she would talk to her kids and me about, me and my brothers and sisters about the books she was reading and ask us to talk about the books we were reading and things. And what I learned from my mom is even though she had never had any sort of formal education beyond high school, she was this incredibly learned, excited to learn kind of person. And that put that spark in me. I always wanted to learn more because I wanted to be like my mom. And I always wanted to do better because I wanted my mom to see her son sort of took on what I tried to teach him. She was terrific, actually. And the biggest single regret I have in my life, actually, which I can't do anything about, is that my son never got to meet my
Mm.
mom.
Dude, I have goosebumps just thinking about hearing about that. My father passed away in December, 69 years old. I feel that's young, to lose a
Yes, it
parent at
is.
69, and your mom was 58, you said?
58, yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
just
was in
that's
college at the time.
and some people, don't see 58 years. So but, that I got goosebumps just knowing that, she's proud of you, and she's up there shining and looking down and smiling, but, yeah, to feel that you really wish that your son could have had a connection with his grandma, it doesn't always work out that way, I totally get it. I kind of feel that way with my daughter and uh she knew her great grandma, on my mom's side, but she never got to meet her great grandma on my dad's side. And, it's just she was such a character in the family that it's kinda weird to think that she never got to see her great-granddaughter, who I know she would have just, the 2 of them would have been like best friends, you know? So it kinda hurts to know that they didn't connect, but now knowing that my father passed away at 69, he got 6 years with his granddaughter, only grandchild, uh, at this point, and, so something told me I didn't think my dad was gonna pass away when he was 69, but he had some health issues throughout the last 15 years. So whenever I was here with my daughter, I always made sure that they got some time together because I knew, I thought maybe it'd be 10 years or 15 years or whatever, who knows? But I didn't certainly anticipate he would go at 69. He had
But
COVID,
that's great that you did that with your daughter, Mike, and she'll
kinda
remember
set it
your
up.
dad forever.
Yeah, that she still does, like, I'll show a picture of grandpa or my dad, and she'll talk about a time that, oh, he read this funny book and he always did the story wrong on purpose or whatever. They always goofed around a lot, which was really, really cool to see that. I got you for what, about a handful of minutes here?
Yeah, a
Or do you
couple
have to
more
bounce?
minutes for sure.
Okay. So this is what I like to do that kind of puts a bow on the episode and really gets people to understand who you are and what's important to you. And the way that I position the question is, think of it this way. You're the author and the protagonist in your own life story. You get to write the ending. God willing, you live a long, prosperous life. You're doing that now. You're looking back and reflecting on it. And you get to define your legacy. What would it be?
I think it would be someone who tried hard, who was always fair, but who made his share of mistakes also.
Mhm.
and and yet was able to recover from those mistakes and learn from those mistakes. Um, I strongly believe that someone who doesn't make mistakes is someone who just isn't doing anything.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean that I'm proud of some of the mistakes I've made, but I've certainly learned from them. So I think I've done a lot of good things. I think I've treated a lot of people well. I think I've treated some other people probably not as well as I could have. And so when I think back on that, and when I think if I could have been a better person in my life up to this time, it would be all about my relationships with people, to be a little more concerned about their view and their reaction to things rather than it all being about me.
Really well said. I think it's so important to see someone like yourself who's been a leader of men and women for many years at a high level, and you've had all these great successes, but you still are humble enough to say, like, look, I know there's things I could have done better, but also I could tell as you're saying that too, that you're reflecting on like those interpersonal relationships that you just maybe wish you spent more time on here or there, and those things eat away at you, just like a champion who wins, whether you love him or hate him, 7 rings. But I know Tom Brady this offseason worked just as hard as he did over the last 20 seasons, if
That's
not
right.
harder, to get the next one because everybody tells him, oh, you can't do it anymore. You're 43. So there's something about you that I notice is like that, where you're like always learning, trying to make the most of a situation. You made the most of our connection. When you and I actually met, it wasn't too heavy on the show. We were just kind of talking about, hey, what are you up to? What do you do on your show? Tell me about your airline podcast. Wow, you have mic'd up. That's pretty cool. And then I'm like, hello, you'd be a great guest. I don't know if you said it to me or but the light bulb went off. Like, you'd be great to come on the show. And you were. This is one of my favorite interviews out of the 90 plus interviews that are out in space right now that people can check out on Apple and Spotify and all the good places you can find it. One last question, if you have the time to do it, but if you can leave our audience with a message to inspire them to be brave and bold in pursuit of their dreams, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that if you believe in it, and your belief in it is based on something real, not just an emotion, then go with it and don't worry about what other people say. Don't worry if people say it's a bad idea, or don't worry if people make fun of you. Having conviction in your beliefs is one of the most important things you can do to drive your agenda and to really make the kind of change you want to make.
Yeah, conviction starts there. You got to be convinced in your product, service, or abilities, and then that confidence will be grown. That's really, really good insight. This is one of those interviews that I know I'm going to listen to, and I say this quite a bit on the show. Like 2 months from now, I'll be driving to the grocery store, and sometimes I put my own show on, not to hear myself or have an ego trip or anything, but it's because sometimes I forget what we talked about. There's so many of these. And then in between all the interviews, I also have just meet and greet to people and like icebreakers all the time. So sometimes I'll be like, what did Ben and I totally like all encompassing talk about? So I'll listen to this. There's gonna be things I learned from you. There's gonna be things I learned from my insights, right? So that's why this is a beautiful thing. And I encourage people to not only tune in and listen to podcasts, but also if they have it in them and there's a story to be told there, to start their own. And you and I both have podcasts for that reason. We have information we want to get out to the world to make it a better place. You're doing your part. Ben Baldanza, thank you so much for being here. Any last words you'd like to share, or if there's a website or something I left off that you want people to check out, now's your time.
No, you said the websites. What I'll say, Mike, is it's great to be with another upstate New York guy. I think that's terrific. And Tom Brady may have the rings, but Josh Allen has the legs and the arms right now.
Oh, yes, he does. Yes, he does. Surprisingly, I don't have a Bills mug right here. I have my Be Great, Be Grateful show mug. But yeah, absolutely. We love what we have in Josh Allen in Buffalo. We're not too concerned about it. Hindsight's 2020. Would we all say, "Oh, we'll go back and take Tom's career"? That's not even a question. But to be in 2021 like we are right now, after the season he had, which was an MVP caliber, he really took that team on his back. He was like, I forget the percentage, but it was like 80% of the scoring came through
Yeah, I know.
Josh Allen. So where Josh Allen goes, that team goes. That's what people were saying. I was kind of like, that seems a little, you're putting a lot on his back. That's what it was. They built around him a little bit more, gave him a little bit more weapons, and they built that defense because we don't want to be winning games 43-40. Let's start. Let's win
right.
124-17. Can we go back to doing that?
Great being with you, Mike. Thanks so much for this
fun.
interview. Thanks for doing a great show. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, you're a professional, and you're a great dancing partner today. Thank you so much. I'd like to give a huge shout out to everyone for tuning in, especially those who listen all the way to the end to hear this message. Seriously, I appreciate you, and my guests do as well. Giving a quick reminder to subscribe to this show. It's completely free and will allow you to receive notifications when new episodes are released. If you'd like to provide a tip as a gift, you can do so via patreon.com/mikedup. It's spelled MIKED up. Patreon.com/mikedup. You can give as little as $1 per month or as much as you'd like. Every dollar is greatly appreciated and completely unexpected. Appreciate your reviews and your messages coming in on social as well. Keep them coming. Your feedback is valuable and absolutely means the world to me. You can check out more episodes and content at mikeduppodcast.com. We're powered by Social Chameleon. You can also follow me on Instagram. That's where I'm the most active, and it's at Mike DiCioccio, MIKEDICIOCCIO. Thank you so much for your continued support. You guys know what to do. Be great and be grateful.